The abbey stood where the land had grown uncertain of itself. Marsh water pressed against its stone foundations, seeping into the walls like a slow memory that refused burial. In the mornings, fog gathered in the cloister as if summoned for prayer. In the evenings, the bells rang low and hollow, their sound softened by distance, dampness, and doubt. Sister Avellini arrived there young, though youth meant little in such a place. The convent did not count years carefully, it measured endurance. She was given wool garments that smelled of old smoke and other women's bodies, a narrow cell, and silence. No one asked what life she had abandoned. The abbey accepted absence more easily than stories. Her face was unremarkable, pale as unpolished stone. What set her apart was stillness. When others spoke to her, their voices slowed, as if adjusting themselves to her quiet. She listened without reaction, without visible judgment. It was said, later, that people felt lighter after speaking to her, though she herself grew heavier. The task came to her without ceremony. Dreams had begun to trouble the nearby villages. Sleep, once a refuge from hunger and labor, had become a place of dread. People dreamed of empty cradles that rocked by themselves, of saints with eroded faces, of fields that bled when harvested. They came to the abbey seeking containment. Avellini was given an old book, bound in cracked leather, its pages thick and yellowed. She was told to write what was spoken. Nothing more. She obeyed. By candlelight, she recorded each dream carefully, preserving every hesitation, every strange detail. Ink scratched softly against parchment, a sound like small bones rubbing together. The air smelled of wax, damp stone, and human breath long held back. She did not ask why dreams mattered so much. In those days, people believed sleep loosened the soul, allowing it to wander beyond the protections of faith and law. Dreams were feared not because they lied, but because they might speak freely. As weeks passed, Avellini noticed something subtle. While bodies aged and prayers repeated, dreams moved differently. They bent time, ignored death, crossed boundaries the waking world respected. She began to wonder whether freedom existed only where no witness could follow. And whether writing, meant to preserve, might also imprison. As months folded into years, the book thickened with weight that could not be measured by pages alone. Its spine curved, as if bowing under a burden it had never agreed to bear. When Avellini lifted it, the leather exhaled a smell like old iron, damp earth, and something faintly animal, an odor that suggested not decay, but endurance. The dreams grew more intricate. At first they had been simple in their terror, fire, blood, falling. But now they arrived layered, hesitant, uncertain of themselves. People spoke as if apologizing for what their minds had produced. A baker described a dream in which bread screamed when broken. A widow dreamed of her husband returning without a shadow. A monk confessed to dreaming of heaven as an empty hall where God never arrived. Avellini wrote everything. She learned the rhythm of fear in human speech, the way breath shortened before certain images, the way hands trembled when words approached something unspeakable. She never lifted her eyes while listening. To look, she sensed, would give the dreams a second body. At night, silence in the abbey was never complete. Wood contracted. Rats moved behind walls. Somewhere below, water traveled patiently through stone. Wrapped in coarse blankets, Avellini lay awake long after Compline, aware that the dreams had followed her into her cell. They did not appear as visions at first, but as sensations, pressure behind the eyes, a weight on the chest, the smell of smoke where no fire burned. When sleep finally took her, it did so without mercy. She dreamed other people's dreams, stitched together without order or meaning. Doors opened into fields she did not recognize. Voices called her by names she had never carried. She woke with tears already dried on her cheeks, uncertain when grief had entered her. Still, she continued. Faith, she believed, was not the absence of doubt, but the discipline of remaining present despite it. Writing became her form of prayer. Each word anchored something that might otherwise drift freely and return transformed. Yet questions began to settle within her, quiet and persistent. If dreams revealed truths the waking world concealed, then what was she preserving? Warning? Prophecy? Or merely the evidence of a collective exhaustion no one dared name? Time, she observed, behaved strangely in dreams. Death did not end stories there. The dead returned altered, diminished, or unbearably familiar. Perhaps, she thought, death itself was not an ending but a loosening, like sleep, but without waking. One winter evening, as Frost climbed the inner walls of the scriptorium, Avellini noticed her hands trembling above the page. The ink blotched where it had never done so before. For the first time, she hesitated before writing the final line of a dream. It was then she understood, the book was no longer only receiving. It was listening. The change did not arrive suddenly. It settled, as dust does, invisible until it coats every surface. Avellini began to notice her presence inside the dreams she recorded. Not as a figure, not even as a name, but as an absence shaped like her own silence. Several people described dreams in which someone stood just outside the scene, unmoving, unremarked upon, yet essential, like a witness without a face. When they spoke of this presence, their voices softened, as if speaking too loudly might disturb it. She did not tell anyone. The book grew increasingly difficult to open. Its pages resisted, clinging together faintly, as though reluctant to release what they contained. When separated, they exhaled a cold breath that extinguished candles more than once. The ink, once black, had begun to dull, shifting toward the color of dried blood. Avellini's body responded before her mind did. Her appetite faded. Food tasted distant, as if memory had replaced sensation. Bread crumbled too easily between her fingers. Wine burned her throat. She moved carefully now, aware of her joints, her breathing, the quiet insistence of fatigue. Time no longer circled, it thinned. She struggled to recall her own dreams. When she tried, she found only fragments, a shoreline without water, a bell without sound, a sky too close to the earth. She wondered whether recording the dreams of others had displaced her own, as if the soul possessed only a limited capacity for imagining. Faith, once steady, became porous. She continued her prayers, but the words felt older than belief itself, tools worn smooth by centuries of repetition. She did not doubt God's existence, she doubted his attention. If he listened, it was perhaps as she did, without interruption, without reply. One night, a traveler arrived long after dusk. He was thin, his clothes stiff with dried mud, his eyes red from sleeplessness. He asked for no food, no bed. Only the dream. His voice trembled as he spoke. He described a world stripped of sequence. Rivers flowed backward into the mouths of the dead. Churches stood roofless, their altars exposed to rain. Children were born already grieving. Above everything hung a silence so complete it pressed against the chest. At the center of this dream stood a woman writing. Avellini's hand stopped. The traveler could not describe the woman's face. Only that she did not look up. Only that when she finished writing, the world ended, not with fire or collapse, but with cessation. As if a breath had simply been held too long. When he finished, the room felt smaller. The candle flame leaned sharply, as though drawn toward the book. For the first time since receiving her task, Avellini did not immediately write. She felt fear then, not of death, but of inevitability. Of being used not as a witness, but as an instrument. After the traveler left, she sat alone until dawn, listening to the Abbey breathe. She understood, with a clarity that offered no comfort, that the book no longer waited for dreams. It was remembering them. And through them, it was learning her. The Abbey could not remain untouched forever. Nothing that gathers human fear does. Rumors moved faster than pilgrims. It was said that the convent possessed a book that knew the future. Others claimed it recorded sins God himself had not yet noticed. A visiting cleric from the south arrived one morning with clean boots and too many questions. He spoke politely, but his eyes measured stone, corridors, women. Authority, Avellini learned, always arrived disguised as concern. The abbess aged rapidly that year. Her voice weakened, her hands shook when blessing bread. Decisions once made without thought now required counsels, letters, seals. The Book of Dreams was discussed in low voices behind closed doors. Whether it was dangerous or sacred remained unclear. Often, such distinctions mattered less than control. Avellini was instructed to continue writing, but no longer alone. Another sister sat nearby now, ostensibly to assist, though she never touched the quill. Her presence altered the air. Dreams spoken under observation grew cautious, clipped, as if trimmed of their most vital organs. Truth, Avellini realized, changed shape when watched. She felt the pressure of obedience tighten around her like a second habit. The vows she had taken returned to her memory, not as comfort but as constraint. She had promised submission, silence, faith. Yet nowhere had she promised blindness. At night, the dreams no longer waited for sleep. They pressed against her waking thoughts. She smelled rain where none fell. She heard bells ring without movement. Once, passing the cloister pool, she saw her reflection hesitate before mimicking her motion. Death entered her thoughts more frequently, but without terror. She considered it as one considers winter, not as punishment, but as a condition. Time, she thought, was not a river but a tightening circle. Freedom was never absence of walls, only choosing which to lean against. The cleric demanded to see the book. When it was placed before him, bound and silent, he hesitated. His fingers hovered above the cover, as if sensing heat. He did not open it. Instead, he asked Avellini whether she believed the dreams came from God. She answered truthfully, she did not know. That uncertainty displeased him more than denial would have. That night, Avellini returned to the scriptorium alone. She lit one candle. The flame burned steadily, unnaturally calm. When she opened the book, she found a blank page waiting, fresh, untouched, patient. Her hand moved before thought intervened. She understood then that power did not reside in prophecy, but in record. To write something was to grant it duration. To withhold was to let it dissolve back into possibility. Faith demanded obedience. Conscience demanded responsibility. Between them stretched a silence wide enough to swallow a world. Avellini dipped the quill. For the first time, she chose what would be written. And what would not. The blank page did not resist her. It received the ink as earth receives rain, without judgment, without haste. Avellini wrote slowly, aware that each word settled into the world with a weight greater than sound. The candle burned lower, releasing a sweet, choking smell as the wick drowned in its own wax. She did not write what she feared. She wrote what she understood. The dream she recorded that night did not belong to any visitor. It came without voice, without confession. It arrived fully formed, as if it had been waiting beyond her reach for years. She described a morning in which nothing broke, nothing burned. People woke and felt an unfamiliar lightness, as though something vast had quietly departed during the night. Bells did not ring because there was no longer a need to count hours. Birds flew without omen. The sky remained unchanged. In the dream, the world ended not with collapse, but with release. As she wrote, Avellini felt an ache behind her eyes, a pressure that resembled grief but lacked its sharpness. This was not sorrow for what would be lost, but exhaustion from what had been endured. She realized then how deeply fear had shaped every dream she had ever recorded. How much of human imagination was spent rehearsing pain. The quill trembled. Ink pooled. She paused often, listening. The Abbey slept uneasily. Somewhere, a sister coughed. Wood shifted in the cold. Beyond the walls, the marsh exhaled its familiar rot, a reminder that decay, too, was a form of patience. She thought of death, not as judgment, but as silence finally permitted to speak. Perhaps the end of the world was simply the end of meaning imposed by force. Perhaps freedom was not survival, but rest. When she finished, dawn pressed faintly against the high windows. The page before her was full. She did not read it again. Some words, once written, should not be revisited. The effects were not immediate. Days passed. The cleric fell ill, his authority dissolving into fevered murmurs. Pilgrims ceased arriving. Dreams, when spoken, lost their urgency. People reported sleeping without remembering anything at all. The abbess died quietly one night, her face peaceful, as if she had finally been forgiven by time. Avellini grew weaker. Her body, long ignored, reclaimed its demands. She welcomed them. Pain grounded her. Hunger reminded her she was still contained within flesh. She returned to the book once more and found no new pages waiting. Only the last one. The final page did not frighten her. It lay open beneath the thinning candlelight, pale and patient, like a field after harvest. Avellini sat before it for a long time without lifting the quill. Her breathing had grown shallow, each breath measured, as if the body itself had begun to count what little remained. The abbey was quieter now than it had ever been. Not the living silence of prayer, but something older, more neutral. The bells had not rung in days. No one noticed. Time had loosened its grip, and hours passed unannounced. She considered writing her own ending. The temptation was gentle. To place herself within the book would be to grant her life coherence, a shape that could be held and understood. Yet she understood, at last, that this was not her task. The book was never meant to contain everything. She wrote one final sentence, not of prophecy, not of destruction, but of limitation. That there are things no record should survive. That some truths require disappearance. That freedom is not always found in continuation, but sometimes in release. When the ink dried, the candle went out on its own. Avellini did not rise from her chair. There was no pain, no revelation. Only a gradual loosening, as if the world had ceased to require her attention. The smells of wax, stone, and marsh faded. Sound withdrew. What remained was a stillness deeper than silence. They found her the next morning. Her hands rested on the closed book. Her face held no expression that could be named. The sisters buried her without distinction, as they buried all their dead. No marker. No date. In time, the book was sealed and placed behind stone. Generations passed. Wars came and receded. The marsh crept closer. Some say the world did not end because it was written down. Others say it ended many times, quietly, without witnesses. What survived was not the dream of destruction, but the mercy of restraint. And if history remembers anything of Sister Avellini, it is not her obedience, nor her faith, but her refusal to let fear have the final word. By candlelight, that is sometimes enough.
Like and subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories.